I was wondering what you think about changing the first blood feat to something like first to 5 kills to try to get closer timer to the other 2 feats. Also, as a few games off GM last season as Gnar main, love the champ, even though I've seen you say you feel it's one of your more failed designs. Appreciate the streams. Well, I'll say thank you for saying you like Gnar. I'm glad. Surprisingly, a lot of people tell me they like Gnar, including like a lot of my coworkers. Like, I don't know. There's more people than you think that would like Gnar. And just because I have some problems with Gnar doesn't mean that he's not like a cool character that a number of people can really enjoy. Tiffanobi likes Gnar? Oh, no, we know it's good then. Yo, Tiff, it's good to see you. It's been forever. We should hang out once LA is in a perhaps a better state. But okay, great. We've got some Gnar enjoyers in chat. But yeah, so thanks for saying about Gnar. But so the question is like, hey, what do you think about changing first blood feat to something more close to their feats? So I'll note that like obviously I don't directly work on the feats of strength, so I can't say what should or shouldn't happen or things like that. I will say though that personally, it does feel to me like first blood is a little random. You know, sometimes like first blood is like a really well thought out like just like thing where it's like, you know, it was really like it happened and it makes sense, but like, you know, there's a lot of games where it's just like your jungler was AFK in a bush, or two people really like went hard and at each other, and you know one person just edged out the other person, and then first blood. Also, the way I phrased that was, and so my personal take on the first blood feat is it does feel for a team, not a team objective, but for an objective level thing, a little coin flippy, and so I would personally be curious, like, if it would, if there's things that would make it feel less like that, but in terms of like what that could be, I would say I'd leave that to, you know, the team working on it and how they feel about things. Again, I'm been off of work for a while, and I'm, you know, just getting back and just getting caught up, so I don't have like a lot of context on a number of things and things like that. Reynad has said it before, early RNG feels really bad, like Knife Juggler. Players are more okay with RNG later into the game. I think that's true. You know, later in the game, RNG feels like, you know, less impactful, where an early piece of RNG can really like just feel like it throws the whole game off. I think another way to think about RNG is RNG that feels random and RNG that feels like you can adapt to it. Okay? So what I mean by that is, let's use an example of pure random RNG. I'm playing Jinx, and when I shoot you, it randomly shoots a rocket launcher or a minigun, right? That is likely to cause a lot of frustration because the player has no way, not only no way to control it, but also no way to like really play around it. And so you're just like, I'm shooting that guy, and oh man, I really wish I had a rocket launcher right now because it would have done an AoE and killed everybody, but it shot the minigun instead. Haha, Jinx, you're so crazy and random. That's going to feel pretty bad. Comparatively, imagine a type of RNG. There's another type of RNG where it's like, it is random, but you as a player can adapt to it. So instead of, say, this example we just had, Jinx shoots a rocket launcher, or randomly a rocket launcher or a minigun. Imagine there was a version of Jinx that said, randomly, every minute, you equip a rocket launcher or a minigun. That's still going to have some problems. Like, I'm not saying that's a perfect design, but compared to the other design, it probably ends up playing and feeling a lot better to players because it's RNG they can adapt to, right? They can say, oh, right now I have a rocket launcher, so how do I play around that? Or, oh, right now I have a minigun, so how do I play around that? And so even though the gun you were assigned is random, you can then play around the outcome, which tends to feel a bit better. This is the case with things like Dragon Souls. Dragon Souls are designed to be an RNG system that is adaptable to the player. The idea being that when you get into a game, you don't know what Dragon Soul is happening. That's RNG. You don't know what dragons are going to show up. That's RNG. But what you can do is when you see a dragon show up, you know what's coming and can plan around it. So you can be like, oh, this game is going to be a mountain soul. How much does my team care about that? How are we going to play around that? This game, the next dragon that's going to show up is an ocean drake. How much do my team care about it? How much do we plan around it? And so, well, the dragons themselves are random. The ability to play around that randomness in game is possible. Are you familiar with Mark Rosewater, the Magic designer? Yes. Really smart dude who has posted a lot of really useful design articles. If all of you don't know who Mark Rosewater is and you're interested in learning about design, I highly recommend going and looking up the articles he's written on Magic. They are super useful for thinking about game design. Two of my favorites that I've read from him are the idea of pushing power. This is the idea that when you're making a game that is balanced, well, the way I interpret his idea, he might have talked about it a bit different, but the way I interpret it is like when you're making a game that is balanced, that doesn't mean that certain things shouldn't be powerful. And so it's the idea that like red in Magic has power pushed in certain areas, aggression, cheap creatures, whereas green has power pushed in different areas. And like that creates the identity of those things. And then another article he wrote that I thought was really cool is he basically talked about how the Magic cards that everybody like felt okay about tended to be the less successful cards versus the cards that some people felt were amazing and some people felt were trash. It's kind of the idea that like if everybody rates something a 6, that thing probably isn't inspiring really to anyone. Something that is liked by everyone is loved by no one. Whereas if a bunch of people rate something a 10 and a bunch of people rate something like a 2, that thing is probably a lot more compelling, and like will create like a lot more like attachment and interest in it over the long term. But yeah, anyways, I highly recommend checking out Mark Rosewater if you're interested in design. He has written some really cool stuff. Will there ever be an 80 carry champ that is cool and Chad like Aatrox and Darius? I mean, is Draven not cool and Chad? Are you talking about Beefman McBeefybeef? The closest has probably been Graves, although he's, you know, as many of you know, have been moved more towards the jungle. I think there's definitely an archetype and space for a character like that in the 80 carry roster, 100%. One thing you always have to consider, though, in game design is does the character's theme line up with what they're doing? And so one of the reasons that a character like Darius, Beefman Mick Chaddington, right, is a melee fighter is because it tends to make a lot of sense that like a melee fighter would look like Beefman Mick Chaddington, as an example, right? Whereas like, you know, 80 carries, the general thematic of 80 carries tends to be more long range, more agile, more squishy. And so the thematic of like being Beefman Mick Chaddington as an 80 carry wouldn't necessarily line up perfectly with being an 80 carry, which is why you're going to see the average 80 carry be more like of a lighter build. Now that doesn't mean you can't do a beefy 80 carry. That doesn't mean you can't do a tiny tank, right? You can do those things. You can mix up roles and visuals and stuff. But just kind of mentioning that, like, if you're wondering, like, why is the average support, like, friendly and nice and cutesy, and why is the average fighter, like, beefy and thick, and why is the average 80 carry, like, lighter build and flighty, right? Like a lot of the times it comes from like one of the things you want to match up typically. Doesn't mean you always have to do it, but one of the things you typically want to match up is like the role the character performs in the game and the theme they have as a character. Like those tend to go together.